Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing something not dissimilar to videos I've done previously. I've done some more in-depth studies on individual aspects of this, but today I wanted to do a deep dive into a retro technology retrospective. Now, I'm not going to talk about the history of film cameras and the evolution of digital from analog and, microcomputers to PCs to Windows to blah, 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 blah. No. I'm going to take a high-level approach, meaning I'm only going to talk about the useful technologies that were mainstream enough that the vast majority of people used in their everyday lives. I've already done deep dives into the obscure tech that you didn't know about, or other people have said, did you know about CED? Yes, Technology Connections did a whole series of videos on it. You're not teaching me anything new. No, we're not going to do that. But also, I'm not going to get into the technical bits and bobs. I'm just going to give an overview of how regular people used technology in our everyday lives. Now, I am going to start with the telephone. Because telephones today, while on a strictly technical sense, do still exist today, because your smartphone has the word phone in it, it's not a telephone. They're two different things. It's a type of phone, but it's not a telephone. But, what is a telephone? Well, alright. It's a little piece of plastic or metal that has a speaker on one end and a microphone on the other and some form of entering digits, whether it's a dial or a push button or a dial tone, and you talk into it. And you call your friends and you talk. Or you call your work and say, I'm going to be late. Or, you call the principal and say, I'm not coming to school today because my dog ate my homework and or gave my sister's rabies. Yeah, that's the ticket. That's how we use telephones, for, ever. There were various advancements in telephone technology, going from rotary phones to touch tones to cordless, and eventually we got, call waiting and other advancements in technology, caller ID, things like that. Which, by the way, those technologies came about around the same time as the cell phone. So, prior to that, you maybe had an answering machine, and if somebody felt like leaving a message, you could call them back if they gave you a callback number. But until we got call waiting, if you were on the phone and the phone started to ring, you had to say, hey, let me call you back, and then hang up the phone and answer it again. Or, once we got call waiting, push a button, and it would flip over. Or, in some cases, if you were on the phone and it started ringing, you didn't even know it was ringing. The other person got a busy signal and you just didn't even know it. Caller ID started out very primitive. You could star 69 somebody and it would just dial them back. Your phone may have had a redial button if you were lucky. But for the most part, it was just pick up the phone, dial a number, and hope that the other person answered, and then you could talk for however long until your parents told you to take out the trash. But then we got cell phones. Now, in the beginning, cell phones were just cordless telephones that connected to a radio network. Cellular telephone. Cell phone. Now, in the early days, they were flip phones that could do little more than just replicate the functions of a standard cordless digital phone that you already had, touch-tone phone that you already had. You could dial somebody and they might answer. If they didn't, you could hope that they had call waiting, and then they would put the other person on pause and then call you, and then you could call, say what you had to say, and then etc. Or you could leave a voicemail. That was kind of a new concept. I mean, it was basically like leaving a message on an answering machine, only it worked different, I guess, somehow? I don't really know. It's just a thing that exists. But then also you have text messages, which were not easy to do on your old flip phones, but it was kind of doable, but they cost money back then, so you reserved that for, like, you know, maybe you had, like, included in your cell phone bill, you got 100 free text, and then it was 10 cents a text after that, or something like that. So you were counting text messages, which your text messages had a counter on them. Oh, this is text number 76 for the month. Getting a little close to 100. Better slow it down. So you were very careful. And then, of course, we got smartphones, which have basically, more or less, replaced nearly every other device in our lives. So that's the evolution of phones. But now let's talk about computers. Computers in the 70s, for the regular people, didn't exist. In the 80s, if you had money, there were two types of computer users. And I'm talking about regular people. Like, just people at home who had a computer in their house. People. I'm not talking about businesses, how they used it. I'm not talking about how software developers use computer. I'm just talking about how the average American used a computer in the 80s. You had two computer users in the 80s. One, the person that used it for at-home business purposes. The adults. They used spreadsheets to bring their work home from the office. They could work from home if they wanted, or they could do the family budget. They could plan the family vacation. Maybe they could, you know, keep a journal on the word processor. But they were using computers for serious productivity. And then you had everybody else that was using them to play games. Now, while they were pretty proficient at playing games, for the most part, within the confines of their respective technologies, video games, or PC gaming as we think of it today, or gaming on computers as a whole, was a hodgepodge of various incompatible computer systems and incompatible computer hardwares. Some software came on 5 1/4 floppy disks. Some software came on 3.5-inch floppy disks. Some software later on would come on CD-ROM. Some software came on cartridges that only worked with a specific computer. Some software came on cassette tapes that only worked on a specific computer. Some software came on laser discs if you were high-end enough. But for the most part, you had to know if that piece of software was written in the computer language your specific hardware could read and was contained on a piece of medium that you had hardware at home that could access it. So just because a software was on a Commodore 64 5 1/4-inch floppy disk and all you had at home was a Commodore 64 cassette deck, you couldn't buy that piece of software and make it work. If you were stupid and didn't know any better, you could buy it, take it home, and then wonder, what the fuck is this floppy piece of vinyl? Where's the tape? And then, well, now you got to take the open software back to the store, who won't give you a refund because you're stupid and didn't read the box. Oops. Now, things kind of started to consolidate in the early 90s. You know, we did away with the 5 1/4 floppy disks and replaced them with the 3.5-inch disc and zip drives. You notice I rolled my eyes when I said that. Sort of came on the scene temporarily for a brief moment for the idiots that wanted to invest in it, who were too good for CD-ROM because CD-ROM was affordable by the time zip drive came along. So whatever, I'm going to roll my eyes again. But hey, technology. But in the early 90s, the way we used computers wasn't that different. You know, if you had a computer in the 90s, thankfully, you probably had a graphical user interface, finally. You probably had a CD-ROM or a 3 3/4, or a 3.5-inch floppy disk. Or, you know, you probably had some version of Windows or Mac OS or some other GUI like Amiga or whatever. But you were still just doing some video games and some productivity. Maybe you were doing your homework and then printing it out on the printer you had in your parents' office and then taking it to school. Maybe. But things changed by the late 90s. We were using computers completely differently. Yeah, there were still people that were using their computers for work and homework. You know, nerds that were doing homework at home on their computer. Or if you had to take a computer class in the late 90s, you were doing your homework on the computer because you had to. By then, you were probably doing it on a CD-ROM or a floppy drive, 1.44 megabyte, 3.5 inch floppy drive, the standard. But we were also getting online, and we were just browsing the web. Now, a lot of web browsing was just reading articles on different websites and arguing with people in chat rooms and message boards. But there was also very primitive multimedia, internet connectivity stuff. So, like, you could go to some websites and watch, like, clips of a movie or the trailer in a QuickTime format or a Real Media format. Or like 2 or 3 minute videos, highly compressed. Or you could like listen to music on some websites that people were willing to host music files without the, copyright holders, throwing them in prison because, hoping to God that they didn't get caught. And when they did, moving out of the country because, hey, the RCIA sucks. But we didn't know about that. But the vast majority of websites back then were using MIDI files to reproduce, popular tunes, but not necessarily play the songs themselves. But it was still, we were still doing more with our computers. We were also getting CD-ROM, technology advancing, so you could watch movies on your computer, whether it was video CDs, which, weren't real popular, but they did exist, or video CDs or video files you ripped off of a video CD or got off of the internet somehow. Took you days to download via the dial-up, but you did it. So you could watch 700 megabyte AVI files on your computer, or you installed a DVD drive into your computer, which is what I did, and you could watch DVD movies on your computer, which was what I did instead of buying a PlayStation 2 because I had a GameCube. I had no use for a PS2 at the time. But that was how we started to use computers in the end of the 90s. But once we got into cable internet and DSL internet and YouTube came on the scene and MySpace and Facebook and Twitter came on the scene, now we had social media and we had social videos, and later on we would get, streaming, Netflix and Spotify, everything else. Today we live on our computers or connected to the internet through some other internet-connected computer-type device. Laptop, game console, PlayStation, Xbox, smart TV, smartphone, tablet, desktop, whatever. Yes, we kept gaming all along, and eventually we would get into emulation when that became viable. But for the most part, there was a very long period where nobody knew what you could do with a computer, because realistically, you really couldn't do anything that useful with it in the first place. At least not to the regular average Joe. Later on, computers would become more advanced, which is where we are today. And then we had music players. Now, in the beginning, music came on discs that we call vinyl records, although that's a misnomer, because, yes, most records do come, and they're records, they're called records. Most records are made out of vinyl. A lot of records are also made out of plastic. Some of them are made out of wax. Some of them were made out of shellac. So, it's not accurate to call them vinyl records. It's more accurate to just call them records, or albums, which is what we did for 110 years. And then hipsters came along and called everything vinyl. Well, I'm here to call you an asshole if you call it vinyl. Just call it a record, goddammit. Jesus fucking Christ. And if you're one of those younger people that didn't know, Now you know you no longer have an excuse. Stop calling them vinyl. But once technology advanced, we got music on cassette tapes. And yes, they're called cassette tapes. They're not called compact cassette. I know internet nerds that are younger than me did YouTube videos describing the history of the evolution of the compact cassette. Nobody ever called it a compact cassette outside of Philips, outside of 1968. Okay? They're tapes. They're cassettes. Stop calling them compact cassettes. Just call them cassettes. We know what you're talking about. You don't have to be specific. I know there's different types of cassettes, but this is the opposite of the vinyl thing where you don't have to be that specific, which, speaking of which, if you just call them records, you're not being that specific while also being, understood. People will understand what you mean if you just say cassette. I know technically VHS tapes are a type of cassette, but nobody ever called them VHS cassettes. We just called them tapes. We had audio tapes and videotapes. And yes, we called them videotapes. We didn't call them VHS or Betamax. But music started to come on tapes. And then eventually they came on CDs, which was how we listened to music. In our homes, we had stereos set up. Big honkin' hi-fi systems that would have an AM/FM tuner and an equalizer and a dual cassette deck and a record player on top. And maybe an 8-track if your dad was old. And then probably other, a CD player eventually, or a CD changer more likely. But then in the late 80s, or late 90s, early 2000s, we got into the digital era. Once the iPod came on the scene, the MP3 took over. And then we started listening to music that way. And then eventually we got streaming through Spotify and Apple Music and everything else. But if you had a hi-fi in the 80s and 90s, or even today, if you are weird and still have one, nobody invests in hi-fis anymore. They just buy sound bars because they're weird. Sound bars are stupid. Buy a hi-fi. Don't give me you can't afford it. They sell hi-fi components by pieces. Buy the receiver first. There's $100. And then when you can afford it, upgrade your speakers. And then when you can afford it, buy the tape deck or the CD player, or etc., etc. They're like computers. They're upgradable. They always were. But, yeah, go ahead and be an obnoxious asshole and buy a soundbar. You fucking cockroaches. I hate them. Not the people that buy them, but that they exist. And that people buy them. Not the people that buy them, but that they're still being bought. Is what I hate. Just buy a fucking hi-fi system. If that's too expensive for you, you can get a self-contained stereo system. A set-top box, as we sometimes call it. Or you can get a boom box. A boom box is a portable stereo. Now, I don't care if you use Bluetooth speakers, subwoofers, whatever. Just stop using sound bars. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, because I'm probably going to do a whole video on everything I hate about sound bars, if I haven't already. I haven't looked at my list of videos I've already done. I'm not going to do it. So if I ever redo a video, well, maybe I'll give you more information, or my opinion has changed. But we used to have a set-top box, whether it was a boom box or a stereo receiver with a hi-fi receiver with the various components, or a set-top self-contained box. We had a stereo, a dedicated listening device that was for listening to music. We would put our cassettes in it, plop our records on top of it, stick our CDs in it. If it had the internet, we would listen to, if we could connect to the internet with it. Maybe it has Bluetooth or Wi-Fi and we could connect to Spotify, great. If it had a slot for an MP3 player, we'd plug that in. Maybe it had auxiliary ports in the back, and we'd hook our VCR or our DVD player up to it and get good quality stereo sound out of our TV systems. Stereo sound, not a sound bar. Or, whatever. Or you had the AM FM, or maybe you had an XM tuner, whatever. But then, like I said, eventually we got everything went digital. And so now we just listen to music on our phones, or our laptops, or our tablets, or our TVs, our smart TVs. Well, maybe people do that, I don't know. Idiots with a soundbar do that, I guess. I don't know. Obviously, I have a low opinion of soundbars. Alright? Don't take it personal. I hate the soundbar. I don't necessarily hate you for liking the soundbar. Okay? Thank you. But I'm never going to change my mind on this, so don't waste your breath. And then we had portable music players. Again, the evolution was very similar. You had the portable AM/FM radios, and then you had portable AM/FM radios with cassette capabilities, and then CD players, and then MP3 players. Eventually, iPods became the standard, and now, again, cell phones. You're going to notice a pattern where technology converges with smartphones. It's going to happen a lot. Then there was home video. Now, I'm not talking about home theater, but I am going to come back to that, because home theater and home video are two different things. They're interconnected, but they're two separate things. Now, I'm going to just say it. We don't have to talk about Laserdisc and Betamax and all that other bullshit. Everybody and their grandma had a VCR. And we just called them VCRs. Nobody ever called them VHS players. So please stop doing that. You youngins that don't know any better, now you do. They're just VCRs. To distinguish the two, at a time where there were two, we said VCR to refer to VHS machines, and Betamax to refer specifically to the Betamax compatible VCRs. Or you would say Betamax VCR if you were, pretentious. So, you can say VCR, we know you mean VHS. You can say Betamax, we know you mean a Betamax video cassette recorder. We know it. It's just understood. But home video started, not technically, but it started with VHS. With the video cassette recorder, the VCR. And for most people, that's how we watched movies at home. We would go to the video store, or the grocery store, or the gas station, and rent a movie, and go home and watch it 3 or 4 times, and then take it back to the video store, and then a few days later, go back and do it again. Later, when the price of the tapes came down, yes, I said tapes, that's what we called them, we just called them videotapes. When the price of videotapes came down, you could build a home video library and start buying tapes at home. Which is what a lot of people did, myself included. But then, in the late 90s, early 2000s, we upgraded our videotapes to discs. Most people upgraded to DVD. Well, as in, that's what we upgraded to. Now, yes, I know technically HD DVD and 4K and Blu-ray exist, but the vast majority of people that still collect or still buy videos on disc buy DVDs, myself included. I reserve Blu-rays for very specific movies that, yeah, I want the Blu-ray, but for the most part, I'm going to stick to either the DVD or a digital download I get from wherever. Don't ask, don't tell. And then later, again, Netflix changed that. The internet changed that. So now most people just watch home videos on streaming services. They just watch movies or TV shows on Netflix or Disney Plus or Hulu or Peacock, I guess. The 12 people that have Peacock. Or that will still have Peacock after they get rid of the WWE content next year. because that's the only thing of value on the Peacock network. Anyways, so that's how the vast majority of people got their movies at home. But some of those people went a step further and invested in what we call home theater. Now, in the early days, home theater was more focused on audio than video, and this was mostly because there weren't really viable, high-quality video options when home video first came on the scene and went mainstream. Again, we're talking about VCRs here. Yes, you could buy a Laserdisc and get slightly better picture quality, but you had to flip the disc over 2 or 3 times or more, depending on the disc. But most people were content with buying the biggest TV screen that they could afford, which would usually be about a 27-inch television screen. And again, we didn't call them CRTs back then. We just called them TV sets, television sets, or TVs. To distinguish them from flat screen TVs, when those came on the scene, we said tube TVs and flat TVs because it had a picture tube. You don't have to use the moniker CRT. Nobody does that. Nobody did that. But yes, we know what a CRT is. It's a tube TV. That's what the T in the CRT stands for. Tube. Cathode ray tube. They're tube TVs. It's okay to just call them tube TVs. You don't have to be more specific than that. But you would buy a 27-inch. Presumably, if you wanted high-quality home theater, you'd get a Trinitron. Because that gave you the best possible picture quality. And you'd buy the most advanced VCR you could afford. Because, again, most people were going to stick to VHS because every movie that came out and TV show came out on VHS. Not everything came out on Laserdisc. And, again, I didn't want to get up and change discs. I wanted to sit down, pop the tape in, hit play on the remote, and watch the movie. So the way home theater worked is you invested in a home theater surround sound system. Now, this could be a part of your hi-fi component that we talked about earlier. Again, if you were poor, you would get a hi-fi system that had RCA jacks, and you would plug the RCA audio outs from your VCR into your stereo receiver, and you would get the audio from the VCR in stereo, which a lot of VHS tapes could do. So that was, perfectly okay for most of us. 27-inch screen, stereo sound coming out of my big speakers. I'm good to go for the most of us. Or you could invest in a dedicated home theater system, which would be some type of receiver that could reproduce Dolby Digital 5.1 surround sound. Now, most people weren't investing in these to pair with their VCRs because VCRs and VHS could not do surround sound. They physically could not. There was no surround sound data on the tape for the receiver to decode. Yeah, you could just set it to stereo mode or dual stereo mode and then let the receiver fake or just do it that way or whatever. But these became more popular once DVD came on the scene. Yeah, if you had a Laserdisc player and you wanted the home theater experience, you probably invested in a surround sound receiver and you hooked it up using an optical audio cable, probably, or a coaxial audio cable, most likely, so that you could get the best audio quality and you could get it in surround sound, which is what I did. I bought a DVD player and I used coaxial to hook it up to my surround sound Sony receiver, because that was home theater. That's what we meant when we said home theater at the time. Now, the way it was supposed to go is you were supposed to upgrade your TV to a high-definition flat-screen TV and then upgrade your DVD player to a high-definition Blu-ray player And then upgrade your stereo receiver, your 5.1 DTS to a 7.1 DTS. And then use HDMI to connect your Blu-ray player to the 7.1 DTS home theater system with your 64-inch widescreen high-definition 1080p television screen and your full HD 1080p Blu-ray player, and watch movies that way and get the full home theater experience. Now, yes, high-end users did this. This is where the average Joe didn't get the memo. Yeah, everybody bought high-definition TVs, but most people stuck to DVD for various reasons and didn't even bother with Blu-ray, which meant there was no reason to upgrade their surround sound component. So when their surround sound receiver kicked the bucket, they replaced it with a goddamn sound bar. Here's why that pisses me off. It isn't a matter of I hate sound bars and I think stupid people shouldn't buy them because they're stupid. They should buy surround sound receivers because I think everybody should, because that's what would be smart. The reason I hate that people buy sound bars is because people buy sound bars and they don't buy surround sound receivers. Retailers don't sell surround sound receivers, which means I can't buy a 7.1 surround sound receiver at my local Target today because all they carry are those goddamn sound bars, when 20, 25 years ago I could buy a dedicated 5.1 Dolby Digital surround sound receiver at Target because they sold them, because you assholes weren't buying sound bars in massive drone numbers. Massive droves, or whatever the expression is. So it isn't a matter of you're stupid for using stupid technology. It's a matter of it personally affects me, and that is why I hate it and the people that do it. Because I should be able to walk into Walmart or Target and be able to buy an affordable surround sound receiver because they're mass produced, because everybody's buying them. Instead, I have to shell out thousands of dollars for an expensive receiver online from a specialty website because they're not mass produced anymore. They're custom made because too many dipshits are buying sound bars. Sell your sound bar, buy a surround sound receiver, make them mainstream because you brought records back, you brought cassettes back. Bring surround sound back, goddammit! Jesus Christ! Pisses me off. And that's where I'm going to end this video because I got to catch my breath. Stay cool. Thanks for watching.